Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to History of Horror Cinema, my personal podcast tour of the good, bad, and the ugly of horror movie history. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe. Weird Woman, 1944. Between 1943 and 1945, Universal plugged their contracted star Lon Chaney Jr. into a series of 6 low-budget mystery horror films based on the popular 1940s Inner Sanctum radio show. The translation to film seemed an obvious one, as the original radio version starred many notable horror actors of the era, such as Boris Karloff, who played in more than 15 of them, Bela Lugosi, Peter Lorre, Claude Rains, Orson Welles, even a very young Frank Sinatra. These eerie, modest little suspense tales were ideally suited to the B-movie format, each beginning with a darkly humorous introduction from the host spirit of the Inner Sanctum, Raymond Edward Johnson in the radio version, and an uncredited David Hoffman in the films. Weird Woman, the second of the film run, is an amiable time-passer with an unusually strong female-centric cast. It was directed by Reginald LeBorg, who later that year would direct Chaney again in The Mummy's Ghost. The script, by Scott Darling and Brenda Weisberg, was adapted from Fritz Leiber's novel Conjure Wife, about a supernaturally skeptical college professor in a town of practicing witches. Upon discovering his wife is one of them, he persuades her to burn her occult trinkets, which then dramatically turns his luck for the worst. The couple are thus rendered vulnerable to the opposing witch's demonic powers. Some of the novel's basic plot was retained for Weird Woman, the major difference being the origin of how sociology professor Norman Reed meets his wife, and the depth of scheming amongst the wives of academia that doesn't need witchcraft's assistance. Hoffman's distorted face in a crystal ball introduces the tale, underscored by a sinister organ, as he warns the audience that even you, without knowing, can commit murder. Chaney is a somewhat unlikely casting as the mental giant academic Professor Reed, sporting a distinguished moustache to offset the blue-collar connotations. To give him some suggestion of depth, his role is saddled with a tediously repeated device of an inner monologue delivered in an intimate whispered tone. This kicks in straight away, as Reed begins to obsess privately about his new wife Paula, Anne Gwyn, who seems to be going walkabout in the night without telling him. Gwyn had already featured in the occult-flavored horrors Black Friday and The Black Cat, both of which I've covered. Here, a flashback shows us that she is the product of an upbringing by a cult high priestess in the South Pacific, when the pith-helmeted prof meets her. By improbable coincidence, she happens to be the daughter of a professor who taught Reed. Reed whisks her away from campfire tribal frugging, beads, and juju into the more clandestinely sinister world of modern American college politics. There is stiff competition on campus for the new sociology chairmanship post, and Reed is being considered opposite Professor Millard Sortel, Ralph Morgan. Sortel harbors the guilty secret that his published book on South Pacific Island practices plagiarized a student's unpublished thesis. He daren't tell Evelyn, his nakedly ambitious Lady Macbeth of a wife, Elizabeth Russell, she of the exotic high cheekbones and mystery from the Cat People films. Meanwhile, there is even more competition for the position of Queen Bee of dastardly plotting amongst the ladies. Evelyn Anker's Ilona Carr watches with barely disguised jealous venom as Reed brings home his island bride. He and Ilona had enjoyed what he thought was a pleasant flirtation. Jilted, she opts for upgrading her designs on him by any means necessary. This was Anker's 4th movie partnered with Chaney after The Wolfman, The Ghost of Frankenstein, and Son of Dracula, all previous episodes of mine. And her aggressor role makes a refreshing change after being more passive, glamorous victims. If 2 femme fatale isn't enough, another is waiting in the wings to ensnare Reed. Margaret, Lois Collier, is a calculating young student, eager to assist him extracurricularly, much to the frustration of her spurned boyfriend David Jennings, Phil Brown. This is the other invigorating change for a 1940s horror film, where the 3 conniving women, practically a coven, plus Paula, drive the plot twists. leaving the men eclipsed and on the back foot of reeling from their machinations. Despite her uncivilized raising on an island of primitive witchcraft, Paula is shrewd enough to sense Ilona and Evelyn's deviousness behind her husband's back. Instead of heeding her, Reed refuses to open his mind to her beliefs. When he discovers her nocturnal ramblings were to a churchyard to perform rituals for his protection, he convinces her to burn her occult props. He is, after all, the newly celebrated author of Superstitious versus Reason and Fact. As we saw from the novel, this plunges the Reeds into a nightmare of deadly conspiracy. "You left us at the mercy of evils," Paula tells him. No sooner has Paula's talisman been toasted, Ilona kills Evelyn's husband and attempts to pin the blame on Reed. The homicidally jealous David confronts Reed in the gym with a gun and accidentally shoots himself. As the forces of multiple women scorned close in on him, Chaney plays to his strength, that of a haunted victim of the supernatural. Elsewhere, the actor rather than the character appears awkward and stiff when trying to challenge the devilish ladies. Almost literally at the 11th hour, Evelyn develops a conscience about mistakenly accusing Reed of killing Sortel and turns the tables upon Ilona. She plants a voodoo doll at Ilona's home, sowing the seeds of fear in her that ultimately drive Ilona to fall through a greenhouse, hanging herself from the vines at a prophesied minute past midnight. To its credit, Weird Woman demonstrates that classic-era horror films benefited from creating active, interesting parts for their female cast, rather than constantly reducing them to imperiled, decorative baubles. Unfortunately, the B-movie was usually too far under the radar to impact on the rest of the industry. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe.